Welcome to Reclaiming the Workplace, the podcast for leaders who are done managing around dysfunction and ready to lead with authenticity, courage, and soul. I'm Coach Nikki Cates, your host and leadership strategist, creator of the UNMASK Framework. Here we get real about what's hurting our workplace culture and how to heal it from the inside out. Because leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about unlearning the masks, honoring your humanity, removing your workplace armor, and creating spaces where people feel safe to grow. So if you're ready to reclaim your power, your peace, and your purpose at work, you're in the right place. Welcome, welcome. I am your host, Coach Nikki Cates, and we are so happy to be here. Welcome to the podcast that speaks to us unmasking at work and applying the UNMASK Framework so that we can heal our workplaces from the inside out, just like we use the UNMASK Framework to help women heal from the inside out. What I realized is that we can do the same in our workplaces and the other entities where we spend the most of our time in our organizations and our workplaces and our work cultures in the marketplace. That's what the intention of this podcast is for. Now, this is episode 1 of season 1, and we are going to be talking about from masked management to authentic leadership. We are going to explain the UNMASK Framework and give you an idea of what we'll be talking about on this show. What if I told you that the reason your best employees are leaving has nothing to do with salary, benefits, or career advancement? What if the exodus from your organization isn't about people outgrowing the roles, but about people running from the trauma and the drama? I'm here to tell you something that might make you uncomfortable. Bad management isn't the exception in corporate America or in any workplace in the United States. It's an epidemic, just like self-awareness seems to be an epidemic. And if you're a middle manager right now, there's a good chance that you're wearing a mask simply to survive workplace dysfunction, while unconsciously perpetuating that same dysfunction with your team. I know we've all heard the old saying that hurt people hurt people. I know this because I've been there. I've been a terrible manager, but I've also been a good one. And a good leader. The difference wasn't a promotion, it wasn't a training program or a workshop, or a new strategy. Honestly, the difference was when I stopped managing from behind my workplace armor and decided to unmask and start leading from my authentic self. So, welcome to UNMASK at Work. Funny thing, when I first came across this concept of unmasking, it was because I was offered a speaking opportunity and I needed to come up with a topic that would relate somewhat to cosplay. I was speaking at a cosplay healing theory event, and people were in fact dressed up, some of them, in costume and wearing masks. And there I was, sitting there waiting for my name to be called on the stage in the front of the room, wearing 3 different types of masks. I had on a neck gaiter pulled up to past my nose. I had a COVID mask on, and I had on a masquerade mask over my eyes. And I'm sure I looked absolutely crazy, and I was most definitely sweating and hot. But what I began to realize as I was preparing for that speech, and even during giving it and after, how necessary unmasking is in this world where we're more and more whitewashing and attempting to remove any forms of authenticity, any differences, any uniqueness in our society as a whole, but definitely in the workplace. So this is a podcast that has come to me as I've been working through the Unmask series for my Sisters Unbothered community. Unmask at Work is where we're going to stop managing around the dysfunction and start leading through the healing. We're going to start naming it and recognizing it and identifying what it is so that we can find solutions that actually work, and that typically begins with a healing process. Because your work culture, newsflash, is not just a thing. It is a bunch of individual people in the same space, supposedly working towards the same mission or the same goals. Now, when I first started developing what became the UNMASK Framework, I thought I was just trying to solve a management problem. Turns out I was addressing something much deeper. The spiritual and emotional disconnect that's killing our workplaces from the inside out. So here's what we're going to cover in today's episode about the Unmask at Work framework. First of all, let's acknowledge that this is our very first episode together, and I am so excited that if you are listening, I hope that I will earn your trust and you'll come back, and that you'll share with others, because whether we are those middle managers, or we employ them, or we want to try to understand how or why our work culture is the way it is, hopefully this will be your go-to. Now, let's talk about what we're going to cover today. Why are middle managers drowning, and what's really causing this leadership crisis in all types of organizations? What are the 5 layers of the Unmask Framework, and why does each one of them matter? How do we start our journey from masked management to authentic leadership? And most importantly, why this isn't just about becoming a better manager, it's about becoming a more whole human being so that you can show up as a leader. But first, let me ask you something. When was the last time you left work feeling aligned with your purpose? I would even go as far as to say spiritually aligned. I know some of us don't like to address spirituality in the workplace, but calling it spirituality in the workplace creates this thing where there has to be a differentiation. But we want people to show up whole, to show up congruent, to be the people that they are at work, that they are at home. I know personally, there's nothing worse than knowing that the manager that you deal with on an everyday basis is a whole different person on the outside of that space. Or even just your fellow coworkers in general. So what we're wanting to do is to genuinely get connected to our authentic selves so that we can give others the permission to do the same. Not just productivity, not just efficiency, but authenticity. This is going to go beyond diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because when we begin to actually operate from a healthier place instead of continuing to perpetuate dysfunction in the workplace, we will be more open to the better ways. If you're struggling to answer the question of when was the last time you left work feeling purposeful, aligned with your purpose, or spiritually aligned, you are not alone. Most people do not. But here's the reality. Most leadership development programs won't tell you. We promote people because they're good at tasks, not because they can lead people. We end up with managers who know how to follow orders and handle transactions. But dealing with the same people day in and day out, with their everyday professional and personal issues, requires so much more. It requires leadership. Think about your own promotion story, if in fact you are currently a manager or leader. Were you promoted because you were excellent at your job? Of course. Did anyone ask whether you had the emotional intelligence to navigate team dysfunction? the spiritual maturity to create psychological safety for all of your employees or workers. The inner work foundation to lead without projecting your own unhealed wounds onto others. That's deep. And that's work that needs to be done. Because if not, again, hurt people hurt people. And here's the thing that breaks my heart. Middle managers are drowning in unspoken cultural toxicity while being expected to manage through systemic dysfunction. You're absorbing team dysfunction, organizational toxicity, and trying to fix everyone and everything to keep your job, and burning out in the process because life does not stop lifing. Society does not stop societying. I know I'm making up words. But tell me that doesn't sound familiar. Just like in a domestic environment, toxicity and dysfunction start from the top. Everything rolls down from leadership. But here's what most organizations miss. The quality of those who interact the most with the employees, which is middle management and lower management, is the true determinant of whether people stay and whether they return. You can have a CEO or a board as tough as nails and just as mean. But if you have middle and lower management that cares, serves, understands, and provides a healthy work environment for your employees, that's the experience that they will most likely remember and show up for. So what is the cost of getting this wrong? Employees leave because of drama and trauma, not because they've outgrown their environments. Now, there are situations where that be the case, but they are definitely the exception to the rule. That's the difference between a toxic workplace and a transformative one. John Maxwell speaks about this in his 15 Laws of Growth. A growth environment, an environment that is cultivated so that people become better. They grow. They aspire to become their best selves. That's what we are supposed to want, not just for our company or organization to be better, but our people as well. So how do we fix this? How do we go from masked management to authentic leadership? That's where the UNMASK Framework comes in. Let me introduce unmasking at work. UNMASK isn't just an acronym, though it is that too, because I've made it one. UNMASK represents 5 layers of transformation that take you from managing through your coping mechanisms, dysfunction, to leading from your authentic self. Let me break it down for you. And I want to just real quick remind you that this does not speak to perfection. Perfection is a trauma response, okay? You uncover. We are looking to uncover cultural harm and compassion fatigue so that it can be addressed instead of pretending it doesn't exist. Navigate. We are navigating beyond HR checkboxes and DEI legal jargon. Okay? Manage. Psychological safety in real life. Which means that we also have to make sure that we know how to identify and create psychological safety workplaces. Advocate. Advocate trauma-informed leadership. That means that those that are thrust into leadership should be aware of their trauma responses and how they react with people. Who you are in your regular life most definitely trickles into your professional life and vice versa. And our last aspect of the UNMASK framework is S, culture strategy as soul work. We are sustaining culture strategy as soul work. Now, I think what some of you might be thinking, because we're talking about the workplace, is the use of the word soul work or spiritual intelligence. You might be thinking that's sounding pretty touchy-feely for a workplace framework. But here's the thing. Traditional management approaches treat people like human resources instead of whole human beings with holistic lives. They focus on behavior modification instead of inner transformation, and that's why it never truly sticks or creates lasting change. They create compliance instead of connection. And how's that working out for us? We have the highest levels of workplace burnout, mental health crises, and employee disengagement in decades. And let's not even start talking about this new concept of quiet quitting. When I say this framework saved my leadership career, I mean that literally. I was managing from a place of my own unhealed trauma. I was wearing masks to survive organizational dysfunction and wondering why my team interactions felt so draining. The moment I started doing my own inner work, acknowledging my own masks, addressing my own compassion fatigue, getting spiritually and emotionally grounded, everything changed, not just for me, but for every person on my team. Because here's the truth. You can't give what you do not have. You cannot create psychological safety if you're operating from fear. You can't build authentic relationships if you're hiding behind professional masks. You can't heal team dysfunction if you haven't addressed your own. So let's walk through each layer of UNMASK and what transformation looks like at each level. Layer 1, uncover. Again, uncovering from cultural harm and compassion fatigue. You can't heal what you can't acknowledge. Most managers wear masks to survive workplace dysfunction, then unconsciously perpetuate that same dysfunction within their teams. They're managing through their own unhealed wounds while trying to lead others. This is the thing. People can see past the facade. They can see that you are leading from a place of brokenness and dysfunction. And that's what you are going to see reflected back to you in your work environment. What does culture harm actually look like? False loyalties and dysfunctional family workplace dynamics. Compliance over connection. People following orders without feeling seen or heard. Promotion without preparation. And emotional labor exhaustion. Managers carrying everyone's dysfunction without the proper support. I remember realizing I was in what I call the compassion fatigue cycle. I was absorbing team dysfunction, adapting by developing my own emotional armor, trying to manage and fix everything, burning out, and then repeating the cycle over and over. I had become the problem I was trying to solve. And I was going insane, for we all know the definition of insanity is what? I know you know how to fill in the blank. It's doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. But that's how you create a cycle, because you're just continually going in circles. The transformation here is moving from managing through dysfunction to creating spaces for healing and growth for yourself and for others. Layer number 2, navigate beyond HR checklists and DEI legal jargon. Equity work that doesn't trigger organizational landmines is what we're focusing on here, because we are in the post-DEIA administration. Traditional DEI initiatives often miss the mark because they speak to policies and issues instead of piercing the armor that we all wear to our workplace every day. Do we know the people that we really work with? Real equity work requires spiritual and emotional intelligence, something that all leaders should be required to begin to, if not hold dearly, be introduced to and be required to work and grow into. It's about creating conditions where people can disarm themselves to receive what they need to grow. It's about being seen and heard as the foundation of all inclusion work, not replacing adjectives of who people are, such as a Black person, by replacing it with the word DEI. A DEI person. That's not what we're talking about here. And that, at its very root, is well beyond spiritual and emotional intelligence. It is in the whole opposite direction of it. It's about building bridges of commonality that go beyond demographic representation. If you all are in the same workplace, you all are supposed to be working towards the same goal. But is it worth all of you to be insane on a daily basis in order to reach it? If you answer yes, there is a much deeper process and journey that would encourage you to pursue. The question isn't just how diverse is our team, but how do our team members show up authentically versus performing just to survive? The transformation is moving from checkbox compliance to heart-centered belonging. And that's well beyond any quote-unquote DEI initiatives. Layer number 3, manage psychological safety in real life. Because safety isn't a policy, it's a practice. Psychological safety can't be mandated from above. It must be cultivated by the managers who interact with staff on a daily basis. It's about creating brave spaces where people can grow uncomfortably, because growth requires making mistakes, asking questions, and needing support. This means giving permission to be imperfect while striving for excellence. It means normalizing growth discomfort and making mistakes part of the learning process. Here's something counterintuitive that I've learned. Real psychological safety includes celebrating when people outgrow their roles. That's right. When someone on your team is ready for something bigger than what you can offer them, that is a success, not a failure. On the other hand, allowing people to recognize that you have them in a role or a position in which they are not able to operate at the levels that you would require. It takes a lot of humility for someone to be able to even address that out loud. Allowing a safe space for them to come to that realization and have the opportunities not to be fired and back on the job market, but to be offered to figure out what it is that is a better fit and providing that for them. The transformation here is moving from fear-based compliance to courage-based growth. I want to say that again. I want to make sure you understand that we're moving from fear and compliance to courage and growth. Layer number 4, advocate. Trauma-informed leadership. Now, we want to hold space without holding all the weight. Many employees, especially marginalized ones, carry workplace trauma. As managers, we need to create supportive environments without becoming therapists or burning out from emotional labor. This requires, of course, spiritual discernment, knowing when to support versus when to refer. It requires recognizing armor and understanding why people wear masks to begin with. But it also requires boundary setting, caring without carrying everyone's pain. And when I say spiritual discernment, yes, we could be talking about a very religious perspective right now, but it doesn't have to be. It can just be understanding that there is a bigger picture, that there is a higher meaning to everything and everyone. And when one thinks from that perspective, they are looking at people through different eyes. You're not responsible for healing everyone's trauma, but you are responsible for not adding to it and for creating conditions where healing can happen. So the transformation here is moving from managing symptoms to healing root causes. Layer number 5, sustain culture strategy as soul work. Transformation that lasts requires tending. You have to cultivate. Real culture change requires ongoing spiritual and emotional commitment, not one-time initiatives. The goal isn't perfection. It's creating growth environments where people feel safe to exist, be, and become their best selves. This includes daily spiritual practices for leaders, such as something as simple as mindfulness practices, succession planning that prioritizes emotional and spiritual maturity, and legacy thinking, building cultures that outlast current leadership. The transformation here is moving from temporary initiatives to lasting cultural transformation. Now, where do we begin this journey from mass management to authentic leadership? First, and this is crucial, start with yourself. You cannot lead others to a place you haven't been willing to go yourself. There is nothing worse than asking your people to do something that you're not willing to do. Here are 3 questions to ask yourself this week. What masks do you wear to navigate your workplace? Be honest with yourself. What version of yourself do you put on when you walk into the office? And how is that different from who you are at your core? And if you don't know who you are at your core, are you willing to take the time to become acquainted? Number 2, how often do you feel emotionally drained after team interactions? If it's more than occasionally, you're likely absorbing the dysfunction instead of addressing it. Number 3, when did you last feel spiritually aligned with your leadership role, where you felt like you were moving with purpose and intention and making a difference? Not just professionally satisfied, but deeply connected to your purpose and your authentic self. Now, I want to be clear. This isn't about overhauling your entire leadership style overnight. No. That's not what we're talking about here. This is about taking one authentic step at a time. And might I remind you, even in the workplace, a baby step is still a step. Maybe this week that looks like admitting to your team that you don't know something, instead of pretending you have all the answers. Show a little humanity to them. Maybe it's asking someone how they're really doing and actually listening to their answer and seeking to listen beneath the surface. Maybe it's setting a boundary that protects your emotional energy so you can show up more fully. Remember, transformation isn't about perfection. It is about creating growth environments where people, including you, feel safe to even exist, to be, not just do, and to become their better and best selves. And that brings me to why this work matters so much. You know, when I look back at my leadership journey, I can clearly see the before and after. It's like those pictures that we see online. There was a before Nikki and an after Nikki. Before, I was managing tasks, trying to control outcomes, hence trying to control and manipulate people. I was always exhausted because how many of you know that trying to control the external outcomes is always going to burn you out and exhaust you, because we really can't control people and what they do. I was exhausted, my team was disengaged, and nothing felt sustainable. What's more frustrating? After I started doing this inner work, after I learned to lead from my authentic self, because I actually got acquainted with her, everything shifted. My team became more creative, more resilient, more connected. Not because I became perfect, but because I became real. I became human. I became authentic. I became more transparent. I became more vulnerable. So here is my challenge to you. Stop settling for managing